Hi everyone, I think I'm live. So I'm just jumping on a quick live session to try and correct some of this stuff. Curtis Morrison just posted a tweet and talked about Valerie Smith, the arguments that the government lawyers were making, and I want to address that because, frankly, we need to argue what is worth arguing. We need to argue with some understanding. Let's just not make bullshit up and argue that and wind everybody up, with misunderstanding and misrepresentation. So let's try and address the reality and, try and get some sense into this, because I've been explaining this document procedure for many months, right? And I am no fan of the documents procedure. Let me just make that clear. I believe actually that the implementation of the documents procedure, which was done, I think it was in, I'll have to check my dates, but I think it was in November or October of 2019 when that was first implemented. It has been an absolute mess. And it caused problems to DV 2020. It certainly caused problems to DV 2021. And with or without the COVID crisis, with or without that idiot Trump, it would have caused a complete mess simply because they implemented a really bad idea really badly. They just don't know what they're doing. Now, in my job, let me just state, I'm not a lawyer, right? I'm an enterprise architect for a large software company, a large services and payroll company. And in my job, I look at business process and I see how I can improve that through software. And I can see evidence of badly implemented process and software in their systems, and which is why I've tried to understand what they've done, and I've spoken to KCC directly. I've spoken to the management there, and I know what they do. It is daft, unfortunately, but it's not what's being represented right now, either by legal teams such as Curtis or Miss Smith. I think actually of the two, probably Miss Smith is probably more accurate. So, and if she is more accurate, don't argue that point. Move on to something that's actually more useful, or certainly attack the document process itself, right? So let me just address the document process, and this is going to be important for DV 2022 people, because it's going to mess up DV 2022 as well, unless the government make a change here. And so it's far more valuable to challenge it from the real cause of the problem, right? So when KCC implemented this new document procedure, they increased the requirements to become documentarily qualified, right? Ready for scheduling. They increased and put an extra barrier in front of DV candidates to be able to get their interview. And that's a problem. I mean, and it's been a problem all the way through. Prior to that point, I think it was November 2019. I might have my dates wrong, but it was about that. I think it was implemented right at the beginning of DV 2020, and it wasn't in DV 2019. Prior to that, if you submitted your DS260, that was processed and you became documentarily qualified pretty shortly after that, because all of the DS260s were processed electronically and relatively, relatively predictably. You could say roughly how long that backlog was going to take to clear through. There were times when the backlog was very high. There were other times when you could submit the DS260 for any case number, and it would be processed predictably within 2 weeks, right? There were other times when we could say, oh yeah, there's a huge backlog at the moment, so it's going to take 3 months. But it was predictable, and as soon as your DS260 was ready, you received a ready for scheduling email, and you could reliably say, that in the next batch of interviews, you would be scheduled if you were current. It was literally as reliable as that. And, you know, KCC screwed the whole thing up, frankly, by introducing this document procedure. The instructions at no point state that there is a rule that you have to wait to be asked to send your documents in order to submit your documents. There is no rule, and there is no statement that there's a rule. Okay, so that's where I have a problem with what Curtis said in the court hearing yesterday. He said that there was a rule. There is no rule, and nobody suggested there's a rule, right? So around about 6 months ago for DV 2021, I was telling people to send the bloody documents, right? Whether you've been asked or not, because I could see what was going to happen. And I was saying to people then, at least, look, you need to get ahead of the flood of document submissions that there are going to be. Some people listened, and plenty of people got their documents processed without being asked for documents, okay? So there is no connection between being asked for documents and having your documents processed. There is no rule. So first thing, that's the first thing. The instructions, if you read the instructions, actually talks about you will be, I'll tell you the exact wording. It says KCC receives and processes the DS260. You will receive instructions for how to submit required supporting documents. Your interview will not be scheduled until you submit scanned copies of the required supporting documents, etc. That doesn't say there's a rule that you have to wait for those instructions. If you know the instructions to submit your documents, which I have published on my website, the clear instructions, even with additional interpretation of how to do that, then you don't have to wait, right? So there is no rule. And as I say, many people have had their documents processed without being asked. Now, there is a risk of the document submission being made without them asking, in that if you imagine someone throws a ball, or, you know, they have to be ready to catch the ball, right? So if you throw your documents at KCC and they're not ready to catch that ball, I think what happens is they get themselves in such a mess that they just start losing documents. Perhaps they delete emails. I don't know what they do. That part of it certainly needs addressing. The lawyers should be arguing with the absolute shambles of the process. No doubt about that, right? There's clear, overwhelming numbers of people, and I hesitate to say the word evidence because it's difficult to actually, prove that someone followed the requirements correctly, and that happened en masse, and that en masse KCC lost documents. Right? It's difficult to prove all of that, but there's overwhelming numbers of people that say, I sent my documents and KCC have told me they never received them, or I sent my documents in October and I never heard anything about them, etc. And so it's absolutely a mess for sure, right? But around about December of last year, I started saying we're going to have a problem if people don't start sending documents. KCC are not asking for documents from enough people, and so we need to actually just send the documents in. And some people did that, and some people have been scheduled because they took that action, right? Okay, so let's talk about this case. So Curtis has referred to a particular case, which is an Africa case, just over 80,000. I've been in contact with a European case of about 36,000 who had the same experience. And I don't want to say your name, the gentleman that I've spoken to, but it starts with a P, and I appreciate your sending me information about your case. But in these cases, it's where people submitted documents early. They may or may not have been asked to, they submitted their DS260 early in the process, right? They may or may not have been asked to submit documents. They probably were. And then they submitted documents earlier and they got the ready for scheduling email early. Okay, how does that happen? We've all been taught that KCC work in case number order. but I've been saying for many months that that's not always true. If you see my replies, and I've been replying this way for at least a year, that the order is sometimes not exactly precise. And the reason is this. Let's say you have on day one of the process, you've got no 2022 documents. So we'll talk about 2021. Let's say on day one, which was June 6th of last year, you have no documents, right? Then you get a bunch of people who send in DS260s on day one or day two or day three. Pretty early on, if KCC are working and they're working correctly, they might have a big stack of waiting DS260s that get processed. Those DS260s are processed at different rates, right? Because some cases are more complicated than others. Single cases do tend to go faster, but a single case of a person that has been traveling around the Middle East, works as a nuclear rocket scientist, and was divorced 17 times before, is going to take longer than a single applicant, or even a married applicant of a husband and wife, where they're both, let's say, European, they've never traveled outside of Germany, and they're an accountant and a salesperson, right? Very simple to process their case compared to the guy that's been traveling all around the Middle East. And if that guy who's been traveling around the Middle East also happens to have a name which matches a name on the terror list, then you can bet your bottom dollar that DS260 is going to take a long time to process, right? And so it's only when the documents or when the DS260 is processed that KCC will then ask for documents. So day one, they open up the DS260s, all the DS260s flood in. Day 5, they already have some DS260s that are processed, right? And those DS260s are at all sorts of number ranges from low to high, right? You might have had someone who submitted their DS260, even though their case number was Africa 80,000, right? And they probably didn't understand that they were at least a year early to submit their documentation, but whatever, they submitted their DS260. And because they are one of the first people off of the pile of DS260s, then KCC would ask them for their documents, and perhaps they then sent in their documents. So it's perfectly reasonable that a case at 80,000 would have their case processed early, either because they were asked for documents, or they just said, well, I know I can figure out how to send in the documents, I'll just send in the documents. Perhaps they saw my my description of how to send in the documents, which gives people the KCC documents address. It tells you how to reference the documents, which documents you have to send. It's all been on my website for over a year, right? So somebody that was looking at my website, for example, would be able to find out that information and doesn't need the email asking for the documents. And there could have been other places they could have found out that same information. If somebody had the information, all I did was I copied and interpreted the emails that I've been seeing for a year and a half now. Okay, so and I published that in 2019. There's a document. There's an article on my website which is the title of the article is something like Document Procedure Modification, because they modified the procedure over a year ago, right? So now they may be asking high case numbers for documents because they run out of workload. And that wouldn't just be in the first few days, it would be at other periods of time as well. So KCC would send out, periodically send out requests for documents to be sent in, but there are some points in time, let's say they've got a stack of, I don't know, 1,000 cases where they've got documents. And I'm trying to sort of show you that there's a stack of paperwork. There is no stack of paperwork, but I'm trying to use this as a demonstration of how it could work. So they've got a huge pile of documents on their desk, right? And they start giving those documents to people that are working the case. You can imagine this business process, right? They give 10 to Jane and 10 to Mary and 10 to Ben, right? And Mary, Jane, and Ben go and work those documents. But at some point, the person actually handing out the documents to be processed, to be verified, would get to the bottom of that pile, even after the first few days of the process, right? So, and that's just how a business process will work. There's nothing confusing or illogical about that. What we should be complaining about is the fact that KCC at no time were ahead of the game and asking for enough people to send in the documents, because they generally, if they were prioritizing work, they were only asking people for documents based on which cases they thought were going to be current in a couple of months' time. So if you look at the evidence now of which cases have been scheduled, you can see the pattern that very young, very early cases, very low case numbers have been scheduled because they were asked for documents generally first. But there are a few anomalies, a few outliers, which shows that other people got their documents processed even with higher case numbers. So, okay, none of that should be a surprise. So for DV 2021, in some cases, the arguments are not worth arguing about. We should be arguing about the points that are worth arguing about. The documents procedure is a mess, and I'll briefly explain why it's a big mess in a minute. The documents procedure is a mess. The work that KCC are doing is not enough in volume, hasn't been at any time in the last year and a half, etc. And you can never find out what the status of your documents is. It's like a black hole. You can't find anything out. Why is that? Okay, so I spoke to KCC about a year ago about this, and I spoke to Philip, who is one of the managers at the time. I don't know if he's still there actually, but what he told me was that the KCC documents group is a separate group, different to the group of contractors that answer the phone, that deal with regular cases, different to the group that process the DS260s, etc. When they implemented the new system, they said, okay, we'll set up a totally new department to process the documents. And guess what? We'll make that department a separate email address. We won't let them speak to the public, right? So we're going to not publish a phone number for that group. And because it's a separate group and it's probably separate organization, separate management and everything else, there is no communication. This is the worst bit. No communication between the regular KCC employees and the group that do the documents. There's no communication. So where you can only phone these people on the normal number, and you ask them what's the state of your documents, and they will say, when they were answering the phone, they would say, we don't know, we can't see, we have no access to the system where your documents are being processed. So they couldn't tell you whether you'd sent the right documents, the wrong documents, whether your documents are being processed when they were likely to be processed. Nothing. They couldn't tell you anything useful, just completely useless, right? And then one day, hopefully for some cases, KCC documents department, the different department, processes your documents, and hey presto, you're ready for scheduling. Happy days. Except by that time we were all banned. Or there was bans, there was COVID, and at some point KCC just stopped doing all of that work. They stopped both departments. They sent everybody home, and their contractors, they cut costs. They didn't pay people, and from there is where we've got the mess. Okay, so let's not get this wrong. Let's not invent bullshit. Let's not invent rules that don't exist. Let's understand the process so that when Smith says something, rather than arguing that point and making a foolish point in front of the judge, you know what you're talking about, so that you can argue the things that really matter. It's not that there was a rule and anything like that. It's that they just made a bloody mess of the whole business process, right? And that's what they did. Okay, that's my rant for this morning. I've just seen something I want to address there. Anyway, so that I hope that's clear about the documents. For 2022 cases, what does that mean for you? if I were a 2022 case, I would be submitting documents myself without being asked, because why not? There is no rule. For example, you might get processed, your documents processed. The only thing I would say is that there is a risk that when they implemented this, as I say, October, November time of 2019, a bunch of people sent in their documents proactively, and a lot of those documents just went missing. And over the time, I think a lot of other people actually do, somehow lose their documents. Let me just see my document procedure. Documents. A lot of people sent in their documents and the documents just got lost, right? Because I don't know what the hell KCC did with them, but it's clear that, I mean, there are some people that try and send in their documents and they don't follow the instructions well, and so their documents probably weren't complete. Maybe they were held back by the email system. There's all sorts of reasons, and so there's legitimate reason for some cases why KCC would say, no, we haven't processed your documents. They do make clear that unless you send in every document that they want, they're not going to process that case, right? And rarely they come back and say, you're missing some documents. They rarely say, you're missing this document. They just come out with this random, unhelpful email saying, you haven't sent us all the documents yet. You got to send, let's say you've got to send 4 documents. They'll say, no, they're not good. It would be really nice if they would say, your document 1, 2, and 3 are perfect, but your document number 4 is wrong, or you don't have an extra police certificate that you're supposed to have, or whatever it might be, right? It would be helpful if they would give that information, but they haven't set that up. They haven't implemented the system well enough to give people the feedback to know which documents are good and which are bad. And we're, basically almost 2 years into this documents procedure mess, and they still haven't done it right. And I lose my temper about it because honestly, it's the sort of thing I do for a living. I've just put a link in there, which is a link to my document that gives people full instructions on how they should implement, how they should send the documents, right? So go and click that link, have a look. If you're a DV 2022 case, go and have a look at that and send in your documents. Be very, very careful about how you send in the documents and that you've got the right documents, right? And then give it a few weeks, give it a couple of months even, depending on your case number, you may be a year away from your interview, right? So in a sense, if you're a high case number, there is no real point in sending the documents yet, but you can go ahead and do that anyway. Then contact KCC and occasionally ask them, are they satisfied with your documents? And for some people, that sort of seems to get the process going a little bit. Not for everyone, I have to say. Other than that, I heard feedback. I unfortunately couldn't be on the Jacob hearing personally. I had a meeting at exactly the same time. It was really frustrating because I heard that the legal team did very well with their arguments, and that's great. I'm thrilled about that. And we need to continue the arguments like that, but we need to continue the right arguments, not the wrong ones. And don't wind up the whole population for nothing. Okay, so that was the main thing that I wanted to address. Let me just pick a few questions here. I don't have a lot of time right now, so I'm just going to pick a few questions. Okay, this one's a question I'm getting all the time. Khalid is asking, what's the date? What's the date for who submit the initial date? Yeah. So I think, I don't know why you're asking about the date, but you're asking, what if you have submitted an entry without your passport and you have no legitimate reason to have not had your passport at the time? The rules say that you'll be disqualified. The 9FAM guidance, which is the guidance that consular officers go by, has been updated to explain to them how they refuse a case that has been submitted without a legitimate reason for the passport, right? For not having the passports, or for claiming an exception with the passports. So it looks like they're planning to refuse cases. However, the documentation does allow for consular decisions about this. The consular officer can decide whether he's going to refuse a case or not. Now, it gives pretty clear instructions on when they should refuse the case. It gives instructions on how they should refuse the case. But we have not yet seen the number of cases we need to see, the sort of the experience in volume to know how those cases will be handled, right? We know that KCC are delaying documentarily qualified emails, ready for scheduling emails, based on someone not being able to provide the passport, a legitimate passport that was, or a reason why they claimed an exception. So I'm not 100% sure that it's going to result in disqualification for all of those cases. It should do. The instructions were very, very clear, and there's no reason to be confused about that. But if you took the choice to enter anyway and claim that you were, you had some sort of exception, I can't say for 100% certain that you will be disqualified. I expect over the next 2 to 3 months, we'll probably know more because we'll see some evidence of cases going through interviews, and I'll be getting, I'm sure, emails from people saying, I got disqualified because I didn't provide my passport with the original entry. And my answer will be, shouldn't be a surprise. You should know that disqualification was at least a likely outcome. Okay. Asa Nicole, my police clearance has expired and I want to resend documents again because I emailed KCC. They told me I haven't seen my documents. Okay. So you do need to resend all of your documents. Get your new police certificate and send that one, or if you want to, send the expired one. Bear in mind, in some countries they'll say the documents are valid for 3 months. They're only good up to 3 months or 6 months or whatever. But the American government, for immigration purposes, consider them valid up to 1 year. So you may actually be able to use what you think is an expired police certificate because it's still within 1 year. MK Songs, good to see you again. Can I send my documents when I send an email to KCC to unlock the DS260 form? Yeah, the two things are unrelated. If your DS260 was processed and let's say they asked you for documents, you can then unlock your DS260. Some of those changes will require that you send new documents, but if for example let's say you got married since you originally submitted your DS260, you're now going to have to send documents for your spouse, etc. And so in that case, yes, you would resend all the documents. But since the documents are a birth certificate that shouldn't change, a police certificate that generally doesn't change, etc., your passport doesn't change, your marriage certificate doesn't change. Most times when you unlock the DS260, your documents won't change. So there's no need to send them. But in certain circumstances, use a little bit of common sense. And yes, you can send documents. Okay. This is just on that same subject. This question is about, can you use a police certificate for a country that you haven't revisited? Maybe you went there years ago, you haven't revisited that country in years. Can you use that police certificate that is older than 1 year? Technically, yes, you can. That's stated in the rules and the instructions for the COs. Although I would say, if it's easy enough to get the police certificate, just go ahead and get it, right? If it's an online thing you can apply for, just get it. Why take the worry, right? Why have that additional worry? But you can, in theory, get them to accept an older than 1 year police certificate if you've not been back to that country. All the questions that I get like this today, what's the chances of interview? I can't, for DV 2022, there is absolutely no information on which we can make any sort of guess, right? The only thing I can say is you're 53K. That's obviously going to be a 2022 interview, but I don't know It's not going to be a 2021 interview. You've got lots of time, right? But I don't know what your chances of an interview are, because we know nothing about how many selectees have been chosen, what the COVID impact will continue to be, and so on. There's no way I'm doing predictions, what your chances are, all right? So I'm just going to ignore all of those questions now. Sent an email to inquire if they're satisfied with the documents, no response. How long does it take them to respond to emails? Well, in normal times, it takes a few days or a couple of weeks. In these times, it's a mess. There is chaos going on. I said there would be chaos. There is chaos. It's not a surprise. And Marisa, I'm sorry, the bad news is that if you're not already documentarily qualified, you've got a problem. I hope you're on one of the lawsuits. I hope you're a plaintiff in either Go or Jacob or Good Luck or Rye. And if you're not, then your chances of getting an interview, are not great. If your case number is high and you're not a plaintiff, your chance of getting so if your case number is high, you're not a plaintiff on a lawsuit, and you're not yet documentarily qualified, there is pretty much no chance you're going to get an interview, right? It's not going to happen. The only chance that sort of scenario would have is if the lawyers somehow manage to get an extension of time that benefits everybody, not just the named plaintiffs, but that benefits everybody. So an extension of time for processing, which is difficult, or an allocation of visas for processing later. So pre-allocated and, for processing later. That is easier for named plaintiffs, but actually in DV 2020, that sort of thing happened for non-named plaintiffs as well. But we haven't seen the final outcome for DV 2020 yet. And I'm sure I've got a question here. What about DV 2020? And we're still waiting is the answer. There's no need to ask me that question either. We're still waiting for Judge Mehta to make his mind up. Does it help telling KCC that you're Go plaintiffs? Daria, I've already seen evidence, I would say evidence, that Go plaintiffs are starting to be, worked by the government, because the Go lawyers have provided a list of all of their plaintiffs to the government, and all of a sudden some ready for scheduling emails went out. I'm sure some of those Go plaintiffs will be getting their 2NLs pretty soon. So they already have your details. You can contact KCC, and there's no harm in saying you're a Go plaintiff, but they already know, they already have a list of all of your cases, so they're working it. Daria, I'm sure it's a good thing that you're a Go plaintiff. That same thing can't be said yet for Good Luck. Good Luck is with Judge Mehta. It's been assigned to him, but so far the government don't have a list of the 24,000 cases, or the 11,600 cases rather, with the 24,000 people. They don't have that list yet. Judge Mehta will ask for that list. I'm sure Curtis and Raphael have got that ready to go, but they're not at the point where Good Luck is having any impact on those particular cases. So if you're a Good Luck case and you suddenly get scheduled for interview, etc., it's most likely because of coincidence. It's not necessarily because of the lawsuit as such, because Judge Mehta, as I say, has not asked Curtis for that list, nor given it to the government yet. So it's early days for Good Luck. Okay, and some people are worried about Good Luck and Go, whether the cases will be consolidated. I don't know whether they will or won't be consolidated, but Go has a head start, is slightly earlier than Good Luck, and therefore is getting a benefit. The Go selectees are getting a benefit from their very early filing. You're asking, is there a chance after September for Nepal or any other region and any other embassy? We don't know yet. We'll have to wait and see what the what the outcome of the lawsuits will be. And again, for Nepal, Nepal had the opportunity to sign on to the Good Luck case without initial upfront cost. So I hope you became a plaintiff. It was smart to do so. For Nepal, before being current, 13500 number was updated in visa bulletin for 2020, but only 6420 in. Oh, why this huge difference? Okay, so the Charlie Oppenheim is the guy that decides the visa bulletin progress. He bases that on information being passed to him from KCC. The information is how many cases are documentarily qualified, not just for Nepal. Don't think of it as just Nepal. It's for every country, every region. And the cases went, or the VB went current because, as far as Charlie Oppenheim was concerned, there was very low demand based on KCC telling him that only this number of people are documentarily qualified. He looked at the demand, he looked at the remaining visas and said there's no reason to continue holding back case numbers, right? We can just make everybody current. The problem with that is that KCC were giving him that information based on their bad handling of the documents, right? So, because they hadn't asked for or processed documents for most cases, and most people were just sitting there getting frustrated, why aren't KCC processing my documents? But KCC are reporting, therefore, to Charlie very low numbers, and that meant that they got, they went current in all regions very early, and frankly not correctly. But so that's what it means. I've explained that in detail in previous videos, but hopefully that was enough to explain it now. This is an important question for general reasons, right? Can I change my interview location from this country to that country? Many of the embassies are refusing to take selectees from outside of their country, right? They know that they're being held back in terms of the numbers of visas that they can process in general. They're being told to prioritize certain types of visa case, and that they need to do some DV cases, but not many, to satisfy the requirements. That's what they're being told, right? And so, generally speaking, an embassy is saying, well, we'll focus on our local cases then. We don't need to do very many DV cases, and we've got a lot of family-based visas, people waiting, etc., and that's what they're telling us to prioritize on. So we'll do those. That's what they're doing. So you can ask for to be, interviewed in some other embassy, but in many embassies they're just saying no to that. And KCC sort of helping the embassies say no. They're not actively sort of moving cases. Now, if let's say you come from, I'm just going to make it up. Let's say you come from Germany. You happen to be living in Hong Kong right now, and Hong Kong won't interview you for whatever reason. I don't know if that's true or not, whether they're interviewing, but you ask, can I be interviewed back in Germany? Because you've got a connection to Germany, because you're a German, then you've got a good chance of being moved to Germany. But you can't just then, if you're a German, you're living in Hong Kong and you say, oh, I want to be interviewed in London or whatever, or in Cairo, because I like the way Cairo work. There's no good reason for you to be moved to Cairo, and Cairo are probably going to say no, right? And it's not about Cairo, but I'm just making the point about how the visas will operate. This is a weird question. Ali, you had a police caution for assault 24 years ago. Do you think you'll be admissible? Inadmissibility for police interactions and that sort of thing, for arrests and crimes that you commit, is based on a standard of crime which is called a crime of moral turpitude, right? And they're pretty significant crimes, and a simple assault is not a crime of moral turpitude. If you assaulted someone and you had a weapon, that could be a problem, right? If it was aggravated assault, in some countries it's described as aggravated assault, that might be seen as the level of a crime of moral turpitude. There are other crimes which are more serious in nature and crimes of moral turpitude. And so simple crimes, low-level crimes, generally speaking, don't cause inadmissibility. And if it's a simple assault, that's not normally a problem. And certainly if it's 24 years ago, also the time, if you did something 24 years ago, even if it was relatively serious, but you've lived a totally clean life since then, that helps as well. It's a long time. Accra. There is a lot of confusion about the embassy in Accra. I've heard a few people who've received the 2NL, but the website doesn't reflect this. Is there any way to know the true position? So I believe Accra has accepted a few interviews, but they're still showing as in transit, right? And so if we look at Save Diversity Visa, let me just check that. I haven't checked that for Accra this morning. Let me just quickly check that. They've got a list of embassies which have not accepted a single case, and so far Accra, Ghana, is showing as one of the embassies that has not accepted a single case. But there are, in Africa region, there are 200, no, is that right? In Africa region, there are 86 cases in transit. And when a case is in transit, it means that KCC has sent it to the embassy, but the embassy have not updated SEAC yet to say that they've received the case. So in those 86 cases in transit, I'm pretty certain that there are some cases in Accra. And when Accra get off their asses and update SEAC, then we'll know which cases are in Accra and which are scheduled. However, Accra Embassy, you suck. You suck in so many ways, it's not even funny. You refuse too many people, you haven't been working, you're just a crappy embassy, Accra. Sorry, but that's the reality. And to top it all, you can't even bloody well update the SEAC system on time like most of the other embassies manage. You suck, really, Accra. Just in every way possible, right? So that's the position, with Accra. But I am pretty sure I've heard from multiple sources, different sources. I tend to not believe one person telling me something, but if multiple people tell me something, I believe it. Multiple different people, right? So based on that, I've had multiple reports that Accra has got interviews scheduled, and I believe it. Okay. Thank you for what you do. Christina, firstly, you're welcome. Thank you for the kind words. Is there anything else you can do to push your case? You can always try and be the squeaky wheel, right? You can try and push. There's no harm in that. It doesn't cost you anything, and it doesn't cause you any problem to ask KCC. Bearing in mind, the embassy don't know anything about you until you're scheduled, but you can certainly contact KCC. And when you do that, as I mentioned before, you can mention that you're a Go plaintiff. So by all means do that, and hopefully they will take note of that. This is an interesting thing about the Gomez plaintiffs and the Muslim ban. Now, the Muslim ban banned people in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, right? And cases were actually sort of heard and rejected because of the Muslim ban. For the cases of 2017, 2018, 2019, I don't believe there's anything that can be done. I don't believe there's a way of fixing that. The lawyers may see that differently, and maybe one day there'll be a lawsuit to try and fight for the for their rights back, as it were, for those cases that were previously rejected. But the Muslim ban was tested through the courts and found to be legitimate, right? The third version. The first two versions were taken down, but the third version was allowed to remain in place. So it was a lawful order made by the president at the time, a complete arsehole, we know, but never mind. He was the legitimate president at the time. And it was a lawful order that caused the banning of those cases. So for 2017, 18, and 19, I don't think there's going to be any help. If Gomez, however, wins finally, and cases are allowed to be issued. The 9,095 visas will probably be issued pretty quickly, so there may not be time for a Muslim ban case to get their case reopened. If you were previously refused your visa because of the Muslim ban, you'll be able to ask for a review of your case, but there may not be very much time. So we might see a few cases go through that were denied in 2020, DV 2020, through the Muslim ban if Gomez wins the final result. But I can't be 100% certain, and the timing of that might not work well, in your favor. So we'll have to wait and see. Okay. Okay. And generally, DV 2020, as I mentioned earlier, we're still waiting. There's no news on that. I haven't got anything else to tell you or to say about that, right? Is it true that there's no affidavit of support requirements for DV 2022 and no public charge denials? No, that's complete bullshit. That's not true at all. Public charge has been a part of immigration law for at least 100 years. Okay, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who came to this country as a young child, recently died. She was one of the Supreme Court. Her family went through a public charge. It had to satisfy public charge concerns. We're talking a long time ago. So public charge is still a concern, and some CEOs will still ask for the I-134 or other evidence that someone is not going to become a public charge, right? What has been taken down through the changes recently is the DS-5540, which was Trump's attempt at making it harder for immigrants to come into the country. And that's been blocked. The DS-5540 is no longer required, but the I-134 or statements of personal savings, etc., or the general need to meet the public charge requirements, that still remains in place. It's not true that that's gone away. And that's the same for every country. Now, the concept of satisfying the CO that you will not become a public charge varies by CO, varies by embassy. Some of them use the I-134, some of them don't. Some of them, are more relaxed about that requirement. In some embassies, it's rarely even an issue. Sydney is an embassy I often talk about, where I've almost never heard of Sydney failing a case, refusing a case for public charge concerns, but it could happen. So, so I always suggest people prepare with bank statements, or failing bank statements showing a lot of personal savings, then get an I-134 from someone in the USA. Okay, I explain all of that on my website. A related question here is, which affidavit of support do you need to fill? It's I-134, not the I-864. There is a technical difference between those two forms. The I-864 is legally enforceable, whereas the government says, their own words, they say that the I-134 is not legally enforceable and therefore is not used in some cases, right? Sorry, the I-864 cannot be used in some cases. The I-134 will not be used in the other cases. For DV lottery, the only form you can use is the I-134, right? No doubt about that. If you go to my FAQ on my blog, you'll see an article I wrote. What's the difference between those two forms? And I explain. Right. Mayu, is there any possibility of a DS-260 being disqualified without asked of documents or given a chance for interview? Not disqualified, no. KCC have no legal authority to disqualify a case. They never would disqualify a case. They can ask for documents, and if you don't give documents, they can, not schedule your interview. That's not the same as disqualifying a case, right? So no, you can't be disqualified, but you may not get, you will not get an interview if you don't send in your documents. That's for sure. So there you go. Okay, a couple of quick questions, and then I have to call this a day. Um, Pro and Anthony, is there time to unlock and edit a submitted DS260? Is it better to wait? For DV 2022, every case number has time to unlock and correct their DS260 if you've already submitted it at this point. There are no interviews going to start until the 1st of October at the very earliest. But your case number, EU 14,500, won't be interviewed in 2021 for sure. It'll be a 2022 interview. You've got months to wait, so you've got plenty of time to unlock and correct your DS260. And I generally explain to people that unlocking and correcting your DS260 does not delay your interview. Okay. Now, I would not recommend a DV 2021 case right now to unlock their DS260 in general, because we're right at the last minute of scheduling. I wouldn't want to, even risk any delays at this point. But generally speaking, unlocking a DS260 should not cause any delay. Okay. You're trying to figure out which embassy to select in the DS260. It doesn't matter what you select. They're going to schedule you based on your home country. That's the reality of it. So select the one that's local to you. In Iraq, they're gonna put you to one of the locally, one of the local embassies. But they'll decide. You don't get to decide. The form suggests that you can pick your embassy. You really don't. Yeah, so you made a small mistake. So Ebenezer is saying he's made a small mistake saying 2nd of June 2002 on your initial entry, but the right one is 7th of June. I guess we're talking about, what are we talking about? 2002? Could that be your date of birth? Are you that young? I've got shoes younger than that, older than that rather. But yeah, so no big deal. Just if you've made mistakes with dates or names, a little bit of a mistake on the initial entry, in general, always correct that in the DS260. So correct the date of birth, etc. Correct the name. If you've missed out a name, if you've misspelled a name, just correct it on the DS260. Do not try and change documents to match the stupid mistake you made in the beginning. Just correct the DS260. It works, right? No problem there. Cubans, yeah. The Cubans are in a bad position for DV 2021. I don't know if it's going to continue in DV 2022. You don't mention which year you're in. I think I've seen you before, Marylise. And I think you're DV 2021, right? But yeah, they haven't sent their appointments. It's a pain. Charge support should bring is required or not. I addressed affidavit of support. Can I have answer? Oh. Answer what? I've got hundreds of questions here. I don't know what question you asked, Sammy. You just wasted your chance for getting an answer, really. For interview appointment, to the KCC sending by rank, or are they sending randomly? Okay, so once all cases are current, so I described earlier about how cases become documentarily qualified and what order of processing they have. But then later, once cases are to be scheduled, they go in, because all cases are now current, there is no difference between the cases. So that's why we have an Africa 80,000 case being scheduled before everyone else, because there's no difference now. There's no rank order difference. And the 80,000 case was processed before lower cases. By the way, I just want to say something. People are misunderstanding some of the data that we're seeing from Save Diversity Visa. That on his page, he provides the highest case number that has been scheduled at a particular embassy. That does not mean, let me just be clear about this, that does not mean that if, let's pick one here. So Serbia, right, has a highest case number of EU 8700 as being scheduled. It does not mean that every case number under EU 8700 has been scheduled. So if you're EU 8900 and you're thinking, okay, it's my turn next, that's not necessarily the case. There could be other cases below 8700 that are going to be scheduled before you because their cases were processed before you, right? So whilst it's interesting to have these highest case numbers that have been scheduled, please don't be confused what that means. It does not mean that they've got to that point and that they're moving in case number order for scheduling, because they're not scheduling in case number order. They're scheduling in processed order, right? So yeah, make sure you understand that. Okay. Haven't seen any of the regulars on here, but I'm sure I've just, because of my ranting at the beginning, I've missed off a lot of the questions, I'm sure. So look, I think that's probably as many questions as I can, as many questions as I can answer this morning. Hopefully that was useful. I hope I've corrected this misunderstanding that's out there about the processing basis, etc. And we absolutely need our lawyers to be well informed and fighting. And I believe they're doing a good job of fighting. But some arguments you just don't need to have. When you're in a weak position to argue, it doesn't help you to argue. You argue the arguments you can win, right? Anyway, right. So that'll be about it. So, Luca, there you go. There's a regular. Thank you, Luca. I understand you're in the legal arena. So that was interesting as well. Thank you for commenting that. Regulars are watching and learning, you're saying. I wonder what you're learning. I think you know all of this already, Luca. I don't think any of this is news to you. But there you go. Anyway, I do hope that was helpful anyway. Have a good Saturday, everybody, for all of you around the world. Keep watching. I'll be back on in a couple of days' time. I'm going to go and clear out my garage now. And I've got a lot of work to do as well. I've got a busy few weeks ahead of me. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye now.